Well, thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here. And it was an unexpected invitation for me because my work is mostly on labor rights. I've been working on labor rights for many years. But when I got this invitation, it was a chance for me to present for the first time this new research that I've been working on in the past couple of years. And it is all about this kind of Chinese organized crime and modern slavery in the online scam industry. So it was a perfect fit. So I was very, very surprised when I got an invitation and honored, of course. So this is the first time that I present this kind of research that I've been working on with other people, with Lin Li, who is here in the audience, and Mark Po. We have been working on this for a couple of years. It's a new phenomenon. And so I cannot think of a better audience than this to introduce this work to the public. What am I talking about when I talk about modern slavery in the online scam industry? We have to take a step back and to see what this online scam industry is. The online scam industry began in the 90s in Taiwan, and that was the very beginning with some lottery schemes and everything which people just were scammed basically online. That was already in the late 90s. And that's the cradle of the online scam industry. And then from the early 2000s, scammers turned attention to mainland China, and they were based in Taiwan, but they were still targeting people from mainland China with their scams and everything. But security, law enforcement in both Taiwan and mainland China quickly tightened up, and Chinese and Taiwanese criminal gangs started engaging in online scamming, and they started moving their servers and operations in Southeast Asia, especially in Cambodia and the Philippines. So that's what happened later in the decade, that is in the early 2000s. At that point, the interesting thing, the online scam industry at that point was still quite small. It was like, when we talk about online scam operations, at that time it was like mostly apartments. They were taking place in apartments, they were taking place in hotels, they were taking place in rooms, small rooms. They were not very visible. Of course, it's an illegal activity. It was very secretive and everything. But the very interesting thing, and this is what my research is about, is a new development that took place in the past few years, in the late 2010s, right before the pandemic, across the pandemic. And in the mid to later 2010s, these scam operations, they started to assume this kind of industrial dimensions. They became huge. They started to coalesce into bigger walled high security compounds. And you had these big compounds like with walls, high security, with barbed wire. And inside this compound, you have literally dozens of companies, scamming company, coming together, working in this kind of new settings. And or also in existing casino complexes, but mostly in these kind of compounds. These compounds are huge, as I say. They are all over Southeast Asia. They started in the Philippines, Cambodia. Now we find them in Myanmar. We find them in Laos. Thailand has also several. And it's a new organization of the online scam industry. It's what we call compound capitalism, which is something that we'll discuss briefly soon. And these compounds are not only scam industry, they are not only scam operations, but they are real communities. They have walls, and within the walls, you have shops, you have restaurants, you have clinics. It's a real community in which these scams operations thrive. The Philippines and Cambodia were the first to move towards this kind of consolidated sector. And especially in Cambodia, Sihanoukville, the city of Sihanoukville became infamous as the hub of online scamming a few years ago. So during the pandemic, the online scam industry boomed. There was a huge boom in online scams. During the pandemic years, you have these compounds and you have the number available from law enforcement all over the region are impressive. In mainland China, the Chinese Ministry of Public Security reported that in 2022, the country's police had solved 464,000 cases of telecom and online fraud, and many of which were perpetrated from Southeast Asia. Hong Kong also, you can see that there are huge numbers, and Thailand the same. The numbers are huge all over the region. And journalists have been, they coined this kind of catchy term, it's a scamdemic. Basically, it is a term which was coined by a journalist for Asia Nikkei and Nikkei Asia. And it is basically refers to this kind of boom, and it's all centered in Southeast Asia, and it was centered during the pandemic years, and that's the latest development. What are these online scams? What do I mean when I talk about online scams? The most common one is the pig butchering scam. You might have heard about that. Pig butchering is a Chinese term, right? And Shadupang, in which scammers, they pose as rich and good-looking people. They create profiles on dating apps, and they pose with mega big cars and luxury goods and everything, and they show off their lifestyle. And they develop some intimate relationship with their targets, and then they proceed to scam them, for instance, convincing them to invest in cryptocurrencies and things like that. Then there are false investment opportunities. We have scammers who create an online chat group and then tell the members that all of whom are scammers in the group, except for the target, about promising fake investment. It's like quite sophisticated. There is a lot of impersonation of law enforcement. It's common here in Thailand, it's common in Cambodia, and in China. Chinese gangs do this a lot. They pose as law enforcement, they pose as people from the embassy, and they call young people, they call students, and they try to convince them to come forward, to cooperate. They say that they have some trouble in China, some problem, and then they ask for money to solve the problem. And many people fall for that. And there are cryptocurrency scams, sex blackmails, of course. Then there are, it's extremely creative. The industry is extremely creative. Like, it's impressive how diverse the kind of scams are. But what is interesting here, and that's why this is the intersection between the online, the internet, and my work on labor rights, is that these compounds, these scam compounds, the one I just said, they are powered by people who are working in conditions of modern slavery. They are slaves. They are literally slaves. Many of the people working in these compounds, they just, some of them enter the industry willingly in the hope of making money, but many others do not. They don't enter willingly. They're slaves. They are just, we will see how they enter the compounds. But they are there against their will. They're trapped inside. The passport is taken away. They just like have no way to work. They're tortured. Sometimes there are killings. There are a lot of murders. It's awful. And you can see in the image here, you can see that is a guy, he's a Chinese gangster that's in Cambodia on the border with Vietnam. That's a guy with a stick, and he's chasing people trying to escape from a compound. Vietnamese people trying to escape from a compound. They were trapped in this compound. They were young. One boy, 16-year-old, drowned. They jumped into a river to try to cross to Vietnam. One boy, 16-year-old, drowned. But and that's the guy who was chasing them. And people, they just have many ways to get inside the compound, but they're not allowed to leave. As I say, they take away the passport, and then if they want to leave, if they are allowed to leave, they have to pay a lot of money. They have to pay tens of thousands of dollars as a ransom, and often they cannot afford it, so they are basically slaves. They just, there is overwhelming evidence of torture, violence, brutality, and the rescues are very rare. There are no rescues, almost no rescues, because I think in Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, where this kind of situation are very widespread, it is very difficult to get these people out. We know where they are. These people are connected to the internet. They work on the internet day and night. These slaves, they are very visible. They're not invisible. They are on the internet. They are constantly on the internet. So we know where they are. Everybody knows where they are. The family knows where they are. The officials know where they are. But the level of complicity that are behind with these compounds are so high and so widespread that it's basically impossible to get people out of the compound. Law enforcement is inefficient, and politicians are involved, especially in countries like Cambodia. And so it is very difficult. And then every time there is somebody who, if somebody goes to the police, the first thing they do is to call the compound, say, we get this complaint, just move this guy, make him disappear, and everything. The police are in cahoot with the compound. So basically, this is what makes this phenomenon unique. You have online scams, so it's not, you have this situation, I mean, you have the internet, which is like, okay, it should be like a new frontier and every new technology and everything. And then you have this kind of modern slavery situation that is like paradoxical. And you have these people who are slaves who are very visible. So. And how do the people enter the compounds? There are many ways, and recruitment channels, there are several. There are bogus hire, that's very common. There are fake advertisements for job, and people fall for it. They see these jobs, the job ads, that promise very good payments and everything, good conditions, so people travel to Thailand mostly. They come to Thailand, and then they get moved to Cambodia, they get moved to Myanmar. Myanmar is the new frontier of this kind of thing. So, and then they get hired. If you're a chef, you have someone with skills, you get a job offer that you can't refuse, very well paid. You are a DJ, we have a story of a DJ doing that, and you have these amazing offers, and then it turns out that it's like scam, and then you get trapped and you become a slave. Then there are professional and non-professional brokers. People get sold to the compounds by relatives, by friends. That's the non-professional brokers. They are not professional. But then you have professional brokers that do it for a living. They are brokers. Their job is to procure people for the compounds. And there are so many of them. And then in China, they're very common. All over Southeast Asia, they're common. And then and it's awful because that this is like this, you know, like all the migrations from China and Southeast Asia and everything. They all rely to this kind of bonds of trust. You go to a place where you have family who went there before and everything. And at this point, with this kind of situation, you can't trust anybody. You can't trust anybody because people get literally sold by their families. They get sold by their friends. So it is really awful. Then you have social media influencers. Some of them cooperate with the compounds. They just try to promote the compound or Cambodia, how beautiful the place is in an attempt to bring people in, and then they find themselves in the compound. Organized crime, gangs, in Taiwan especially, Hong Kong, they are actively involved in this kind of compounds. They just they create fake shell companies and everything. They hire people, and then they organize some work trip to Cambodia. And then at that point, when the people get to Cambodia, they are put on a van and sold to the compounds. Some compounds are run by this kind of organized crime, this kind of gangs. Then there are kidnappings. Kidnappings have become extremely common. There was a time, there is still a time now, it is still the case now, in Cambodia, it's extremely dangerous. It has become extremely dangerous, especially Sihanoukville. It is a place where you can literally get kidnapped on the street in broad daylight for the compound. You get kidnapped and sold to the compound. It was very common. It is very common. And then you have a whole market of people getting sold here and there between compounds. If you are not doing your job properly, you get sold to another compound. There is a market in the open with rates, which we know because it's very visible. People just get sold back and forth between compounds. It's like really like a slave market out in the open, on Telegram, on social media apps. It's like we will see very soon. So I and my colleague, we call this kind of new phenomenon, the scam compound, we call it compound capitalism. And we define this kind of phenomenon according to 4 criteria. The first one is exceptionality, because these compounds, which are huge, you can see the photo, this is a compound. The photo here you see, it is a compound in Sihanoukville, one of the most famous ones. It is known as Chinatown. There are areas of exception. There are walls, there is barbed wire, there are like guards everywhere. You can't get in, people cannot get out. People jump out of windows to try to escape from the compounds. So it's an area of exceptionality, which is the ultimate perforation of state sovereignty. Then there is the labor segregation. And labor segregation means that these people, they still sit slaves of the compound, and also those who do it willingly. They live in the compound, of course. They sleep within the scam operations. And this is something that reminds me and my colleagues of the compound labor regime that we could find in South Africa's mines a long time ago, but also dormitory regime in China, which is the regime in which the workers, migrant workers, are mostly, they live on the premises of the factory. It is a new development, this one, like you have people living, and the reproduction of labor, it takes place, everything in one place. As I say, this is a community, it's a real community. People live in the compounds, which makes them very vulnerable. There is no solidarity, there is no way to get out, as I said. And there is extreme physical and psychological violence, but also there are incentives such as bonuses and promotion. That's an interesting thing. I mean, we don't have time to discuss that. But the labor angle and how these online scam operations are structured, the discipline, the political economy is extremely interesting, and that's what we have been working on. Then there is the issue of forceful data extraction. We believe that this kind of compound capitalism, the scam compound, they represent another more brutal facet of surveillance capitalism. That is like how intertechnologies are used today to extract information. They do the same. The compounds, they do that. They just use more manpower because these kind of scams are like done by people, by actual people. And also, but it's all about forceful extraction of data. And then there is the last issue, the last criterion that we believe is a determining characteristic of this kind of compound capitalism is the reliance on desperate workers. A lot of people under the compound because they had their livelihood destroyed by COVID. A lot of people, they cannot see a way out. So, of course, they fall for this kind of fake ads and everything, every promise, and we have so many testimonies of people who were ruined in Malaysia, in China, Taiwan, everywhere. So this is a compound. You can see it. This is what I'm talking about. This is a compound in Senokville. It's the Kaibo compound. You see the yellow building over there is a casino, which is open to the public. And this is one of the worst compounds. A lot of abuses, a lot of people, they used to find bodies buried in the ground all around in Cambodia. And this is, you can see it's huge. This is a drone shot that was taken by a Cambodian photographer. We worked together last year. And then we were lucky because at that point the Cambodian government under pressure was like cracking down the compound. So we were lucky. We had a drone, so we were able to get inside the compound this way. But this is one of the worst. This is another one you can see is not far from the first one. This is the K99 or Triumph City. This is in the middle of nowhere. It is in Cambodia, it's also in Senokville. And then you can see the walls, you can see that is in the middle of nowhere. I mean, and then you see that even if you escape from there, and then, I mean, it's not easy for people to find their way out. Also because, we don't have time, but I mean, there is a lot of complicity from the local communities. It's not that these Chinese organized, these criminals, they exist outside of society. They collaborate with local societies. Anyway, but this is another compound. This is another one. You see, this is also Senokville, the big building, Nanhai. Nanhai is a hotel, luxury hotel, and all the floors above that are online scams operations. We have photos of people jumping from windows, videos of people jumping out. People kill themselves. I mean, like they're desperate, and you have the video of people jumping from terraces. It's like it's a tragedy, like a humanitarian crisis. It's like huge. We are not talking about just a few people. We are talking about tens of thousands of people in this kind of situation. And then here you see another one. This is the last photo I show. And you can see it. This is a compound. You see the bars on the windows, the terraces, all the bars. People cannot get out, right? But you see that the people are playing volleyball right under the compound just to show that these kind of realities, they are really embedded with local community. They're there. Everybody knows they're there. People live around there. You have the food delivery workers, food deliveries that go inside the compound for the scammers and everything. The local economy and the compound, they are really integrated. And so you can see this is also the same Cambodian photographer. And but why it is important to study this? So one thing, of course, is a humanitarian crisis. So we can't leave it only to the journalists to study this kind of situation. So that's why we have been doing a lot of interviews with my colleague, Lin Li, here. We have been doing a lot of interviews. We have been trying to understand the political economy of the compounds. We have been trying to understand the role of civil society, what can be done to get people out, because nobody is doing it right now. It's a mess. But why it is important for us academics to study this? Because the current research on global China, it mostly focuses on global China from above, like the macro level, the macro picture, also the research on the internet, I don't know, the infrastructure and everything. And sometimes also focuses also on global China from below, local agency, local actors and everything, interactions at the grassroots. We believe that it's important also to study this kind of organized crime, this kind of less visible phenomena, like this one. This is less, not even less visible. Right now it's everywhere, so I wouldn't even say it's less visible, but this is what we call global China's underbelly. Because this allows us to gain some significant insights into global China, something that usually we don't see in all the discussions that we see about China. It challenges our understanding of global China as a coherent whole. We can see that not everything is linked to global China. It's the BRI and linked to the Chinese state and everything. You have this whole galaxy of actors that are like moving under the radar. They are interacting with local society, but they are less visible. And then we don't pay much attention to that because we are obsessing with the idea of global China, like as the BRI, as a master plan of the Chinese government and everything. And we lose sight sometimes of how there is more to that. It's not all about the Chinese party state. We have organized crime groups. We have a lot of different actors, right? Which is quite obvious. It should be obvious, but it's not sometimes. It also provides us with a unique angle on grassroots interactions between Chinese actors and local stakeholders, and which is interesting to me because, again, like, a lot of the discourse on China and also this kind of situation is all about Chinese investment or Chinese organized crime groups. coming in and destroying local society, right? They're like parasites who came in and they just, you have a beautiful city, Sihanoukville, which is nice and everything, and then the Chinese investment came in and then they destroy everything. That's the narrative, that's not what I'm saying. But if we look at this kind of situation, we see that it's not like that. If we examine this kind of situation, we see that local agencies, fundamental, even this, you have Chinese gangs and everything, but they work with local politicians, they work with local law enforcement, they work with local communities. So it is not China, global China as an external body coming in and destroying everything, which is something very simple, it's a very simplistic narrative that we see all the time. And finally, and it also allows, looking at this kind of situation, it allows us to properly situate the scam compound within global trends, rather than framing them as something uniquely Chinese. It's not Chinese. It is an industry. It's a global industry that we find everywhere. We find it in Dubai. We find it's spreading out. It's starting in the Philippines, starting in Cambodia, but it's everywhere. Chinese gangs are dominant. They dominate the industry, but it's not a Chinese thing. And when we talk about it like a Chinese thing, a Chinese industry and everything, the risk of racism and also misunderstanding that often damages also the victims is very significant. Last, I will wrap it up quickly. So how to study it? You think organized crime must be difficult to study, and it is. It's dangerous to study, of course, but how do you do that? I mean, you can do that in many ways, and it's surprising, and that's something we were really surprised, how much information is available out there. A lot of information is out in the open. These scammers are shameless. It's all out in the open. You see their discussion, you see everything. The market is visible. So what we did, we worked with survivors. We interviewed survivors. My colleague Linley did a lot of interviews with survivors, trying to help them to prepare the file for the repatriation when they get, because they don't have passport and everything. So when they get out of the compounds, they don't know where to go, because the local authorities usually, they imprison them, they detain them on immigration charges because they don't have passport and everything. So anyway, it's possible to do interviews with survivors, which is very difficult because these people have been traumatized really heavily. We are talking about real torture. We have videos, we have evidence of torture, heavy torture. But it is possible, some of them are willing to talk. Then there are Telegram chat groups, which is interesting because you find this kind of group for job seekers, where you scam companies, they advertise some suspicious jobs. Others, you have some groups in which members, they share scam phrase books. There are phrase books, there are handbooks in which they share the techniques on how to scam certain people. There are phrase books that are targeting LGBTQ people. There are specific phrase books for people of all sorts. And this is visible, we can find that. Then there are other groups on Telegram where the brokers post the prices for selling and reselling people to online scam companies. WeChat, we use WeChat to examine the online activity of specific Chinese actors linked to the compounds. Douyin, Yandanwang, to find information. We have whistleblowers, they post information on these things on Douyin and Yandanwang. We have a lot of Chinese language media in Southeast Asia, which is extremely interesting, extremely dynamic. And then we have Chinese language bloggers, YouTubers, and influencers who share stories of people trapped in the compounds. Social media pages of business and elite actors, they post everything. They post everything. You can find the police receiving a donation of a car by the scam company, and they post it with pride. We have everything. It's completely shameless. And the Cambodian Red Cross is the same. You can see the Cambodian Red Cross getting donation from these scammers all the time. Cambodian Red Cross is headed by the wife of Hun Sen, and is a very complicated organization. And then, so you see all of that. It's all out in the open if you know where to look. And then you have a website, a social media accounts of local state actors, again. And then, this is a project done by an anonymous collective. It's Cyberscam Monitor. And it is a map of these scamming operations. Basically, there are profiles of scam compounds. Right now, it is only Cambodia, but the plan is to expand it up beyond Cambodia, from what I know. And you can see there is a whole section with the people who are involved in the compound. You can see people from the head of the bodyguard unit of the Prime Minister of Cambodia. You can see triads from Hong Kong. You can see organized crime group from Myanmar. You see a whole variety of people. And there are documented ties to the compound. this is the Cyberscam Monitor, and you can follow it on Twitter. The website, unfortunately, is down. It was taken down by a DOS attack a few days ago. It's like most likely from the scammers. There was a massive DOS attack, so the website right now is down. But this shows that it's possible to study this kind of situation, that there is a wealth of information out there that we can just tap into. And then to conclude, Cambodia and the Philippines in the past, they were the leaders in this kind of industry. They were the leaders, right, as I said before, in the past decade, before the pandemic. But since then, over the past couple of years, many scam operations have moved to other parts of Southeast Asia. Myanmar and Laos right now are the leading countries in this industry, especially Myanmar. Myanmar right now, the border areas right over the border here is like there is a whole proliferation of scam compounds. There is no way to get people out. There is no law, and they cooperate with the local militia, ethnic militias. So it is very difficult. But anyway, Laos and Myanmar. But what we are seeing today is really a global phenomenon. We have evidence of scam compound as far as the Dubai. We have scam compounds in Dubai, also with Chinese who get tricked into going to Dubai for job interviews and then sold to compounds. We have compounds in Georgia. We have compounds in Turkey and also in Mexico. There was a very gruesome story a few days ago. Just to conclude, so studying global China underbelly not only can give us some important theoretical insights into what global China is and is not, but it also is very important for us because, I mean, this is a humanitarian crisis right now, and then it's very important that we look, we examine, we see what can be done and how things work. Because again, everything is there in the open, but there has been no effort to do this kind of research. So that's it.